Hi, welcome to Portal to the New Earth. I'm really excited to introduce a new connection and friend, Stephen Popiotek. I hope I said it right.
Yes.
It's close because it doesn't sound like it's spelled. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, we just recently connected actually through a good friend of mine, Steve Spears, who was on one of these a video that Stephen was also a guest on. And one of the things we'll be talking about today is a session I just did with him to clear some attachments or things in me to help me function better here in the world. And so, without further ado, I just want to let him introduce himself and give a little bit of his background, and we'll take it from there. So, thanks so much for
Sure.
joining me today, which I did want to mention. We are here in January of 2025 because it's quite the year getting off to a start here. And I'm really excited, though, to be working with him to get things moving ahead for our future of the new earth. So, take it away, Stephen.
Thank you, Harlan. Yes, it's a pleasure to be on with you too, and great to also meet you as well recently. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's definitely exciting times to go finally into 2025. I mean, this is definitely a big year as a transition point too, exactly what you're talking about. There's a lot of things that we can also discuss about that in a bit. In terms of my background, I mean, I started meditating when I was like 16 years old. I mean, I'm in my early 50s now. Hopefully I don't look that old, but anyway, but I had a lot of early breakthroughs working with Kundalini energy, going to different gurus back then, like Dhyan Yogi and Ashama, and he was he's passed since that point. I was just trying to devour everything I could as a late teen in terms of new age books, psychic books, ancient culture books, and then there was a lot of positive trigger points during daily meditations to work on my chakras and had a lot of early powerful Kundalini rising experiences that really kind of shook my reality and were like, okay, we're not being taught a lot of things here if this energy is real, and that was nothing more real than that than those feelings I experienced. And that kind of led me down a whole other kind of discourse studying with Kabbalah and Egyptian mysticism were two kind of cornerstones that I evolved into very deeply. And in early 20s, uh, 21, I got into solar gazing. This is back in the 90s before people were really talking about it, but this was my own kind of journey towards that. That was very dramatic and very powerful. And I had flashbacks and memories of having past lives, living in different solar cultures. And so one day I was compelled, and my guides were like, "Yeah, you need to really remember how to look into the sun again, because it's so much more connected to your soul history and who you are as a being than you realize." And at the time, I was like a physics major at NYU, which I had not completed, and so I had that internal struggle, like, "Oh, you're going to get blind. You can't look at the sun," because I was doing it also like later in the day, not like 3:34. And but at that time, I knew I just had to really call on the angels and guides and really feel love in my heart and bring that love energy up to my third eye, and ask that the angels create like a angelic dome of protection around me, so I wouldn't get any excess UV or that I wouldn't want to absorb. So yeah, this is a little bit more of a longer story, but that kind of set me off on a whole other deeper path that opened up Pandora's box and like both extremes. First time I did it, I, the Kundalini was a little bit out of control, was shaking. I felt like electrical shocks in my body. It was like I had to what I learned I had to enter more into like a resonance kind of click in with the solar electromagnetic fields that are coming in. Once I kind of did that, it felt like I plugged in and everything got still and stable, and it literally looked like the eye of God opening in the sun. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on here? And this like incredible love started coming and like incredible love, and I was like, wow, this is. And then now, context-wise, this is in the middle of like Newark, New Jersey. Like I'm like in the ghetto doing this on a rooftop, so it makes it even funnier. Uh, and then I see these tall, golden, luminescent like light beings come down from the sun towards me. And I'm like in shock because I'm like, wow, it was so tangible and present. And they had like mini suns as their heart chakras. And when they came over me, they just swarmed and like held me. And I collapsed on the ground, like hysterically crying because I never imagined such love could exist, basically, and such power. And then they were activating what felt like an inner spiritual sun in my heart chakra to help me wake up to that connection to them. And I was just like, what the hell's going on, And they were like, well, they were like, planets are not the only thing inhabited by extraterrestrials on multiple dimensions, but stars, are much more interesting places than our scientists would let us, have had taught us to believe, the same way that they overly mech, mech mechanize everything and dumb it down to just a physical level without seeing the higher levels that are going on there. They're saying that stars are like the chakras in the body of God, or like the neurons in the mind of God, and they're all inhabited by higher dimensional beings that and stars are connected through beautiful type of wormhole structures through their centers. So it's a whole other thing going on multidimensionally with stars as a direct portal of God's light that comes here. So souls can evolve up to a certain point where their beings are like pure plasma, pure higher dimensional, sixth, seventh dimensional light beings that can then inhabit and interact and create part of the plasma that we perceive. So that's a whole other kind of side thing that's, but that was a huge opening because I was like, oh my God, these beings are here. So and they would always put this like golden dome of protection around me when we're doing the work. But then one day I decided to like, okay, what happens if I decline that protection? And I had heard stories about black helicopters and like more shadow military stuff going on, and that would where these helicopters could pick up on people's signatures oracally. Even back in the day, like later on, Drumville, a lot of people are talking about working with their Merkaba and getting on some kind of strange radar where the helicopters would come by, and usually you'd hear about them back then about through UFO abductees, seeing them and things like that. So I kind of wanted to test it out back then, and I'm curious 21-year-old, right? Wanted to poke the tiger, and so I declined that one day, the protection or privacy, I should say. And 10 minutes later, sure enough, a black helicopter comes, and I was like, "What?" And I've seen all sorts of stuff living out there, and I was like, "Never seen that before." I was like, "All right, that's odd." So I kept doing it several days to make sure, wanted to see if it was really coming and picking up on what I was doing. And this time it's like flying right over my, really low, right over me. And I'm like, oh shit, I should be concerned now a little bit. So they were obviously picking up on the signature of these solar dimensional beings with their technology, which later on I realized has to do more with like longitudinal waves that these beings are creating, or like scalar fields that they have technology to pick up on those fields that our DNA and our auric field also produces. You can shield it, but they have technology that is able to understand that, and this ties into a much bigger storyline. Anyway, so that's a whole kind of Pandora's box in itself, but um, that propelled me further, into my life. Let's put it that way, in terms of attracting both light and dark situations, because at that point it was kind of like getting on a radar, if you would, of these groups. And then later in the 90s, 97, 96, I was teaching my first metaphysical workshop upstate New York near uh Norwich, New York, Norwich, Connecticut. Like that's like 40 minutes outside of Binghamton area. Um, that kind of led into a whole other area where I had met a psychic there who had done some work for the government as a remote viewer. But he was saying a lot of things to me at the point that was like very like, well, why is he telling me all this? Saying that there was an underground base nearby and talking about UFO battles over the area, and and then he said he was still doing contract work for this secret government group. And I fast forward, that ended up creating a whole other drama because he ended up being one of the people that set me up for part of my military abduction story, which again, these are all like more like nodal points in my history. And I'm not going to go deep into that now, but I got back in contact with him when I realized this 11 years later that I had been taken, and confronted him on the phone, and he admitted part of his involvement in that, and subsequently admitted more things to me over a few years period when I started having more flashbacks and more memories. He would confirm certain things, very specific details. So that's a whole other area where my intersection between like deep conspiracy dives and like spiritual, and like metaphysical work kind of connect together. So for me, and also because I always had a science interest, I always kept trying to find a balance to understand, okay, what is, this science of consciousness and how we can access it, and who understands some of those keys, and both on the light and dark side, and how do they use that to influence people, either good or bad wise, so that's kind of a more of a general frame. So then I started doing grid work, taking clients in small groups to different places back then to activate certain energy vortexes at different global locations. And I mean, also maybe go a little bit further back. during that early period, not aside from the solar beings, I'd been visited by a lot of other presences that were just come in, both light and dark, and it taught me very quickly to understand, hey, there's definitely, intense duality that's your angelic, demonic, positive extraterrestrial, negative extraterrestrial, higher light beings, false light beings. So I got exposed to it very early, and that's just been the continual path that I've experienced over the years. And then started working and developing a system of energy work with clients that's also kind of transformed over the years as well. Um, and then that leads us into more of group work I do now as well during new moon, full moons with clients. And we do a lot of grid work as well. And in terms of the past few years, I mean, I'm not sure if what angle you want to go down this trajectory yet, but maybe just as a little point of reference. I can pause there for a minute and see if you
You
want to.
know, that I think that was a pretty good backstory. And like you finished off by saying now you do these grid work sessions. You do, I know it was mentioned that in New York City, if the weather permitting, you're at the obelisk on the full moons. You travel to different places to do grid work, and you do these personal client healing sessions, as I mentioned at the beginning, which we'll get into in just a moment. But I just want to, make a few comments. Since we're basically new friends getting to know each other, there's a few interesting parallels. I started to do some solar gazing uh, back in around 2010. And I used to always wear sunglasses when I went outside. And I lived in New York City, that was the thing, even if it wasn't even that sunny, it was like part of like, the protection
Mm,
from the energies out there. And when I eventually moved to Oakland, California in 2010, and there was a really good view, and also because I guess the marine layer right at sunset, it was really easy to watch the sunset. And I learned about solar
wow.
gazing, and I started to do it regularly. And now I do it quite often, not regularly, but whenever I have the opportunity, either at sunrise or sunset, to just absorb those energies. Also, when I first went off to college, I studied physics. Mostly because my interest in music and
Ah,
in sound and things like that. So we have that in common. And then the grid work thing, I somehow it came to me the book Anti-Gravity and the Earth Grid, which is a
yes,
great
yes.
collection of essays, which was published in
Yes.
1987. And I got it fresh off the press. And I read that thing cover to cover with incredible essays by a bunch of different authors, most notably Richard Levitin, who I then reconnected in
Oh, wow.
2005. And that book inspired a lot of my portals. It was a book called The Emerald Modem, A User's Guide to the Earth's Interactive Energy Body. So
Oh,
I've been
wow.
exposed, and also before reading Anti-Gravity and the Earth Grid, though, I read John Michel's New View Over Atlantis. And that's actually one of the preeminent books that introduced the concept of ley lines and the Earth's energy grid to the world in general. I mean, there's a lot of different people, but that one was a popular book and really started to bring the knowledge and concept of this that the Earth has energy grids and to do grid work along those lines. That that's where things are set up. So I've been conscious of this my whole life, although I've never been on the level like you are, where I actually convene and do grid work sessions. But it's been a major interest and a major influence on my work and my life. So I just thought that those three things came up that we have a lot of overlap.
That's so
So
cool.
I think maybe at this point, and of course, we're here meeting today on Portal to the New Earth, and overarching my view and guidance, and I feel like my mission is to be helping how humans inhabit the earth in the most beautiful, sacred, conscious way. But the underlying aspect of that isn't the architecture or the design or implementing permaculture or what I've called terraquaforming or all these things. That's the final product of it. The most important thing is the foundation is the consciousness. And that's what you're working with. You're working on shifting the energies of the earth grid with groups of people with their consciousness and helping to heal and align this consciousness to this positive timeline where we are living out of love for everything on the earth. So even though everything that you've been talking to so far doesn't seem to mesh with like what Portal to the New Earth is about, building future eco cities, it really does. It's the foundation, it's the groundwork. And like I say, I resonate so strongly with the way you explain things that we're on the same page of understanding the underlying subtle energies that are kind of co opted the earth to create our current false matrix kind of negative timeline that we're in, where we treat the earth, heartlessly. We treat everything from the way we mine the minerals and metals to the way we grow our food, from plants to animals. You can
Mhm.
clearly see it's done heartlessly. And we're moving back to seeing everything as alive and connected and treating things with heart. And so that's been my mission my whole life. And yet I struggle greatly, and I feel that I've been, somewhat suppressed or repressed in a lot of ways to for me to be fully active in the world. And yet, I have overcome it to a good degree with the work that I've done so far in, bringing these portal installations out into the world at Burning Man and other festivals. And just a side note, after I built the first portal at Burning Man, and it went back the second year, and I burned it because my friend said to burn it. I would have never burned it. I saved everything my whole life. I'm filled in this room around me with things even going back to when I was a little kid. But my friends were like, you have to burn it. So we burned it. And then this friend of mine was like, did you ever think of placing your portals on power spots, on ley lines, on using
Mm.
them as places to, go and activate? And I've never actually followed through with that per se, but just bringing them to festivals and burning them. The whole earth is sacred. You don't have to actually go right to
Yeah.
that power spot ley line to activate it. Just by creating these spaces that I do with the intention of shifting consciousness in the through the use of the portals, of their geometry, their colors, their sounds. That's enough. So I've never followed through on that. But I think this would
Mm.
be a good little segue then into what we just did last week. And you could talk about, both me specifically and in general with your other clients. I mean, the reason why I chose to reach out and connect with you is in the talk that you gave back in the beginning of January. You talked about working with some woman that, was struggling for years with issues. And then she came and did a session with you, and you were able to see the root cause and clear it out and heal these problems that no one else was able to see. And so, why don't you just go into, like I say, this work that you do on a personal level, both with what we did and just any other clients, just so you can kind of explain that, you know,
Sure. Yeah. No, it's definitely I guess, also evolved and shifted over the years. I mean, and in the beginning, whether it's personal or collective work I do, I mean, I always invoke the archangels of each direction, because I do come from like more of a Kabbalistic and kind of perspective, and in a way, it's like blending what I call, it's almost like a cosmic shamanism, aspect of it, or I'm really like a wizard on a higher dimensional level, but I'd like to say more cosmic shamanism to make it more acceptable in terms of starseed lineage wise. I mean, I remembered also having off-world connections, Starseed lifetimes since I was much younger as well. So for me, I don't see that. I see them more as our family as opposed to just like aliens on a planet. No, these are just to me, these are extensions of my own higher identity, and they're here, and we're like their ground crew to help create this space for like the portal to the earth as you're describing, and different forms of service that we've all come in to kind of help each other discover, express, mirror, anchor, clear. Um, so for me, part of the work that's shifted the past couple of years in the sense that about 3 years ago, everybody that was coming in to see me pretty much daily were all of a sudden showing up with negative energy cords and energetic implants in their auric field that were connected to different negative extraterrestrial bases and or smaller percentage to different defense contractor bases. And I was like, okay, something has shifted in timeline because this is not the trend I've had for all the years before, that. And also had to open up a deeper kind of scope to look at the higher picture around it. And part of what we had discovered in scanning, because I do remote viewing and scan different locations of different facilities globally that are affecting people, depending upon where the client is at, but also sometimes it's not so nearby, it can be projecting from much further away to the person. It's like a mass commodifying of consciousness that's going on, and it's an extension of the same thing you were talking about before, where were the key word is love, because that's where we're heading in towards. But these darker groups want to keep us out of our heart center. They want to keep us in a state of entropy and separation, conflict instead of cooperation and connection and love, and paradigm shifting towards sustainable, real technology that actually can frame work, and be filled in by a love energy, right? So it's like a geometry is not inherently negative or positive. It depends what the intention of the user is and what they're programming into it, and what frequencies and energies are being projected through that geometry. So we've seen different geometries that are basically also since that point about 2.5 years ago. Even every group work I've done with the new moon, full moon has also taken a bit of a turn where um, we end up having to clear negative grids that these darker ET groups are creating around the Earth. And then I'll see when I'm working with clients, certain people are plugged into some of those darker grids or bases where those frequency technologies are being projected from. So like there'll be a lot of times they'll work with platonic solids. So these negative groups will create, a negative tetrahedron around the Earth through broadcasting from 3 locations, or they'll have a cube broadcasting from 4 locations, or dodecahedron projecting from 5 locations. So there are different, which makes sense. Like they work with the unit cell geometry, but they have technology in those facilities that incorporates technology from their negative homeworld. And it's another way of them trying to terraform the Earth to recreate it in their dark image so that they could have their negative conquest timeline precipitate more. So we're here to do the opposite. We're here to create that positive, what we call star heart rainbow love light bridge. Think of like the Bifrost bridge and like the Norse mythology, to create these positive bridges of light so that we can have a greater communion with our galactic star nation allies that are both ancestors here from Earth as well as our soul level ancestors, and be part of that continuum again, and realize that we are like the extension of the prayers of our ancestors, both genetically and on the soul level, and that we need to step back into that nodal point, and we can help that wave continue to help course correct different negative interferences that have tried to detour us and humanity, right, towards less than optimal timelines. So it all kind of ties in, because for me, it's like the client is like a microcosm of the macrocosm, of the collective grid work, as well as what's happening on a bigger scale, even if it's a smaller pixelation of that. So, for example, you mentioned before about that one client who she had she was going to physical therapy for like 5 years for her neck and her wrist pain that she was not able to get rid of. And in one session, I was able to see she knew there was some dark magic going on from certain people that were nearby that she was kind of in a bit of a war with, let's put it that way, through some like legal situations. But then she also had some negative past life stuff that needed to clear that was also clogging up those areas. So that dark group that was harassing her, they had put what looked like energetic chains and shackles on her wrists and negative collars on her neck. That was part of the structure, and something else in her shoulders as well and head. So when we kind of cleared that out, and I'll clear that out with angels and guides, like it lifted, and she was freaking out because she's like, "Oh God," she stopped going to physical therapy because all the pain was gone in those areas. And I was like, oh, that's a great story. Not everybody's that sensitive or in or extreme like that. Most of my clients do feel it right away during it, or they'll feel lighter or more elevated. And but a lot of them are coming in with different physical pain, not just emotional, mental, and because these constructs are becoming more of tangible as they kind of are. They're using also quantum entanglement technologies from these facilities to try to connect people remotely to technology at the facility, so they have a deeper understanding of like fourth dimensional topology and how to manipulate quantum wormholes, quantum time fields to connect people to technology. So how we would see it as a psychic, but appear as like a cord or energy implant or a geometric crystal or like a module looking like electronic device that's like a hologram version of the actual technology at the facility. So, as they develop, as these technologies are more consciousness level related, then in a way, it's also easier for consciousness to dismantle it as opposed to say a 5G antenna. That's more so because they're working on similar wavelengths as our etheric astral fields, or they're trying to co-opt certain chemical elements in the body to anchor those negative technologies to us. So, reclaiming our own bioetheric integrity, right, of our own biophotonic integrity is essential, right? So the point is we're here to help, for me, be mirrors for each other of that wholeness idea, and be like, okay, where do we need to be accountable for our own shadow that we may not have realized we had to begin with? Because any negative group, physical, non-human, off-worlders, first thing they look for is anyone that has a weakness in their auric field try to compromise them or put something in their it's like having less immunity to get a virus, so it's like strengthening our energetic immune system. And that's also where some of the work you're doing with the geometries and frequencies are very important, because it helps to strengthen our field integrity, right? And lining up with Schumann resonance, like you're talking about, is also important, because that's a major part of how Gaia helps download, higher data to her life streams. And so when you're dealing with these competing antenna structures that are also dumping massive electrical energies into the earth at different points to try to disrupt that flow, then we have problems, because there's a lot of things going on where they try to create a counter force to Gaia's natural, electromagnetic Schumann resonance, more morphic field resonance. And this is where we start seeing a lot of, illnesses and things happening that people are more susceptible to, because they're out of attunement, right, with that natural flow. So the point of work is like trying to help people get back in tune with that natural flow, but also seeing, where we are dealing with things that are affecting people across time and space, not just linearly. So like back to what we're talking with your case too, there's a certain number of star people that I've seen to attract. Starseeds are people, that have these galactic lifetimes, where they had what I call infiltration lifetimes. Think of how like the FBI has agents that are deep cover agents in a gang. So it's a similar idea, but on a multi-dimensional level, where, say, if you were like from the Pleiades, and when you were, part of a council there, or part of their positive military, and a lot of these groups are involved in wars that are fought across time and space, not just space and time. So they'll ask for volunteers who wants to go infiltrate, say, the reptilians in the next life. But this is across the board, so it's the agents of light trying to infiltrate the dark groups so that they could bring light to those negative collectives, like remind those in the dark, hey, you can come back to light, get more intel, data, methodology, technology, awareness, strategy, tactics that can be used by the light groups to help counteract these negative timeline wars that have been going on. So there's a lot of, intel gathering on both sides that happens, and it is like the real Star Wars meets Star Trek on a multidimensional level, a little bit of Green Lantern in there. Everybody is like modern, nomenclature, to see how things are in
I
there.
just wanted to interject with this, with the
Sorry.
point you're about to make, so that we can focus exactly what you said. And you mentioned Pleiades, of course, that's a lot of positive light beings. And I resonate when I was told by Lisa Renee years ago that I'm Andromedan, bringing in a galactic frequency. And I think when we did our session, you used that term to say, oh, these light beings from Andromeda then are asked to infiltrate and come into the negative groups to to try to infiltrate them. And I know you're going to go into this whole story, and that that you saw a particular lifetime where that's something that I did, and then you had me go into this chamber and download that and then bring it back. But also, first came in, I think specifically from Andromeda, through this Orion. I forget the name of the star, and
Oh,
the
yes.
positive group there. So since you were just, you're talking
Mintaka.
in general about this, but you might as well just go into the specifics of what you saw with
Sure.
me and how we processed, that whole negative lifetime. Because once, like, you say, once you volunteer to go into these negative groups, you have to be completely covert, which means that they don't know you're the light being. So essentially, you become this negative being, and you're part of them as a negative being. And then, because of that, they're able to infuse and program you into that negative way of being, even though you are this covert light operative. So
Exactly.
I'm going to let you take it from
No, no,
there. But yeah,
perfect, perfect.
exactly. And then you could, yeah, because I'm still like processing what we did, and so using me as the example for this general work that you're doing of these light workers
Yeah,
that infiltrate covertly, but then kind of get co-opted, and now we have to
exactly.
process that. So take it away.
Exactly. No, and usually I find people, if there's one infiltration left, there's usually a few or several, because we kind of get into that role as being good at it. But then we sometimes get a little gung-ho with our operations up there when we come back into a 3D planet like Earth, where all those groups are present now. It could be more rough, because it's like the point of like a nodal wave in time that catches up with us, and then that intersection occurs here in a planet like that, where we have to resolve some of those tensions and issues. Of course, we also clear some of the karma out more other realms, but part of that also has to be cleared out here due to dimensional similarity and vibration. And then also there have been attempts by negative groups to like try to loop people and make them feel guilty and try to, create a false Piscean like martyrdom about our service, or like because they know light work is very compassionate, so if they can make us feel more guilty about something we did negative, then they try to loop us or open up that old wound again that doesn't always need to be reopened. So we also have to be aware, like what we need to clear versus what they're trying to throw at us to like, agitate. So specifically with you, yeah. So you actually did have some reptilian stuff going on. You had a cord in your third chakra. Um, and that was siphoning part of your power and basically life force energy. And you had an energetic implant in your throat chakra that was trying to create a subliminal influence through that communication center. That was coming from a reptilian base. Basically, the reptilian ETs have it. Their HQ is like in Colorado Springs in terms of the U.S. facilities. That facility comes up all the time, both personal and group work. We've had to do so much work against them in that facility. There's other facilities reptilians have, of course, around the country. They're smaller, but that's kind of like their big one there. Um, and you had a contract with them because again, when your infiltration life is not just with the primary group, but it's also most of the time you'll have a contract as being part of, say, a joint task force or a joint intel force with another secondary negative ET group. So in this case, the reptilians were the secondary group. They weren't the primary one. In other words, you had the incarnation with the group from Sirius B. Sirius A has positive extraterrestrial groups. That's where like Christ's energy was from, like Mary energy was from there. And there were some of the original crystal skull bearers were from there as well. So Sirius A has a lot of beautiful energy. Sirius B is the exact opposite. Sirius B has a planet that's like they're like the Romulans from Star Trek. If you were familiar with that, I say picture like foundation energy is like a Roman Empire meets CIA meets Men in Black. That's kind of the vibe of this group from Sirius B. Um, and they're obviously human group. They look like the Romulans. But they're highly technological. They were one of the hidden hands, along with the reptilians and Anunnaki in the Montauk Project. As a little side note that we can always get back to in the future show, just so people understand it. They're one of the a guy I met many years ago who was connected to some of the Illuminati groups through Council on Foreign Relations, oil industries, and things like that. He had told me that he mentioned about the negative group from Sirius as well, Sirius B, and how there was a connection to one of the Illuminati bloodlines was going back to there, and that there was a lot of conflict between them and the Palladian lineages that went from off-world. So, I've gotten so many confirmations from people I've met over the years that are involved in all sorts of things that, people, scientists I met have worked at underground bases, other intel people that have met with me, clients in military, intelligence field too. So I've seen a lot of crazy stuff aside from my own personal direction in it. Even people I attract that I've worked on, I also gain more intel because I'm working on them. I see other things that are happening, right, in the bigger picture. So bringing it back to you. So the Sirius B group was the one that you volunteered to go into from a lifetime you had, as you mentioned, in Orion, in one of the belt stars that's called Mintaka, right? And people also are familiar with like the Orion code and how Great Pyramids were lined up to Orion's belt. I mean, Orion has a popular place throughout history of many cultures, both light and dark. I mean, Orion is kind of like has the most extreme polarity I've seen out
I,
of many
I
constellations.
thought you said it was a different star than Mintaka, the middle star with a
Let me
T. What's the
let,
type?
let me double check here because I actually took notes from that. Well, because you had soul pieces, yeah, soul pieces from Mintaka. They're part of the Trinurians, they're called. Um,
Trinorian. That was the
yeah.
name. That was the name
Well,
that.
that's the name of the planet. Yeah, I'm about to get that. So
Okay.
obviously every star has many planets, most of them
Right.
do.
But it is the
And so
positive Orion beings
this
because
is positive, yeah,
Orion, for
yeah.
the most part, is thought of a lot of the negative energies there. So it's interesting. And Sirius, people think positive, but that has negative. So it's not.
It's not so
We're
cut
in,
and dry. Yeah, yeah,
obviously
yeah.
our whole galaxy is in duality. So there's both the
And
positive
some
and
sectors
negative.
embody it more than others. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
All right. We'll keep going with this
No,
story.
and exactly what you're saying. Like, I mean, well, from what I've identified in Orion, the star Saiph, the planets in that star system are the headquarters of some of like the Set group, Temple of Set people. But there's every planet in that star system is part of this Set Dark Orion Empire. So that's the bad neighborhood section of Orion is in Saif. That's the primary bad one. There's a few other ones, but that's the main one. Many other stars have planets in Orion that are beautiful and have very advanced, loving civilizations that are the exact opposite of what you find in that system. Trinorians are this other group I channeled that was in the Mintaka star system, and they also work with this Phoenix energy, of course, positive Phoenix because the Set groups and the negative Nordics and other groups they work with like Black Phoenix and Black Sun ideology as opposed to this other true solar symbol that we've had in Egypt with the Bennu bird and the Phoenix or the Sunbird the different Native Americans talked about. The Sunbird or Phoenix is a very core thing for me that's very important for a lot of the grid work I've done as well. That ties into a bigger storyline, but we had a crop circle in England forum that was connected directly to the Phoenix when we were doing grid work, where the Phoenixes were coming in a few days beforehand. I told people we're going to have crop circles form, and so there are things that can manifest very literally when you're doing this work that are beautiful when you follow the flow, and it's like confirmation of how as above so below. There is a connection if you make that positive mirroring, but like, a lot of these dark groups try to create negative mirrors here so that what's above doesn't fully anchor to below in a good way. So we have to kind of clean out as part of the grid work, making the architecture energetically as well as physically, ideally, more compatible with what's coming in from above so that it has a place to resonate here below. And so that's kind of like creating that shared pheno, kind of like standing wave of energy that's able to create a positive cycle and supportive feedback loop instead of a negative loop. But this is, this so the Trinarians, when you had a lifetime with them, you volunteered to go into the Series B group. And you were what was that specifically? You were dun, dun, dun. Or did I mix it up here? Actually, no, wait. Yeah, I messed it up. Sorry. You were not, because honestly, if I could do so many sessions, I forget about people's stories. So looking back at my notes, so it was the opposite of what I said. I have to course correct myself. You had the reptilian lifetime. So the Series B group was a secondary group that you had a contract with from the lifetime as a lieutenant colonel would be like the loosest kind of military similarity. Um, so yeah, so just to reframe that from the Trinorian lifetime, they asked for volunteers in the reptilian to go infiltrate the reptilians. And so you went there as a male lifetime and had a lieutenant colonel life with that collective. From that lifetime, you had part of a joint task force with the group from Series B. So I just had the order reversed. And the Series B group, they had a cord to your root chakra and an implant in the crown. And that was the implant in the crown was more for like behavior modification. And one thing I've also discovered is that only the past few months I started diving more deeper into looking at how some of these astral energetic implants, what are they connecting to like be to holographically stick in someone's field. So then I start looking into different chemical elements in the body that these implants are actually quantumly entangling with like the orbital space, mainly around the electrons, because there's so much empty space in atoms, so that they're able to kind of transfer part of that information field and entangle certain orbital electron shells with their technology. So that gets more into more technical side of it, but it's so in that case, the implant you had from Series B that was connected to the carbon atoms, the one in the crown area. So then part of the work we do is where I work with angels and I channel different galactic beings that were connected to a person's lineage that are relevant for the session. They come in as a team to help cut, remove, transmute, repopulate, and really remind the person that it's about us reclaiming our own quantum sovereignty. That's really important so that we're not victimized by all these unseen technologies that are light years ahead of what we've been taught, even exists, right? So that's kind of part of the flow there. And as we become more accountable for this past life shadow, then we close up doorways to these idiots being able to access us in the same way. Doesn't mean that it'll always stop because they get sometimes very possessive of us when we have those lives with us. And they're the first people I notice the negative ETs are targeting or anybody with these unresolved lifetimes because there's contracts we have to clear from those lifetimes and other symbols that we need to kind of transmute and feng shui, that part of the person's subconscious that deals with that lifetime connection. So, it may be a little details for people, but it's important because this is how, the devil is in details is not just a expression. This is you have to be like a spiritual lawyer with some of this work when you go into the finer tuned scaling, of how they use these previous arrangements against us if we're not super clear with our boundaries, and um, then yeah, that base from Series B group, they were harassing you from a base they have in Arizona, by one of the Indian reservations in southwestern Arizona. They have a facility over there. Um, and Yeah, then there was another group that was messing with it. It was just a human group that was connected to one of the defense contractors' secret unit that they have in Northrop Grumman, because they had put what I call a module on part of your upper back. This goes into a deeper dive story that about the idea of these special access programs, and but not just that, but also certain secret units that are within these defense contractors that are engaging not just in secret space program and higher technology, but also into what I would loosely call time intelligence surveillance technology. Or like think of like how they break down different terms of like, say if you're looking at military intelligence terms or terms in the NSA, like they'll have like communications intelligence, signals intelligence, human intelligence. They have all these terms that relate to specific forms of intelligence that whether it's an intelligence agency or a military intelligence group uses as categories, right? To delineate technology, to appropriate resources, to have teams that are in those areas. But there are classified ones too, right? They also have ones called like radiation intelligence, measurements intelligence. Like these are ones people can Google, on like the defense on the DoD website where they break down the categories more specifically what those things represent. But there's also classified sections of those definitions too that relate to technologies that they don't always want to admit exist. I mean, I found some cool documents on the Pentagon's DTIC website, the Defense Technical Information Center. This like their version of you can Google all sorts of scientific papers on there. They have a non-classified section and a classified section, obviously. So I downloaded a bunch of cool papers over the years from there. There was where they'll sometimes admit things in those papers that you don't always hear about later on. But there was one where they go into a list of like it was actually more under Information Warfare in Russia and China was the name of the title of the article. Information Warfare in Russia and China, put out by one of the army facilities out in I think Texas. It was I forget which one, but they had so of course, sometimes they'll blame other countries and they'll admit technologies in these papers, but we have it obviously too, right? It's not just like Russia and China. Anything we accuse them of having, we have probably 10 times more. So that's one way I kind of reverse engineer also just doing research side as opposed to just the psychic side to say, okay, what are they actually talking about in some of these papers? And though in that paper, they went through a whole list of different technologies like categories, but they didn't really explain deeper into it. But but they mentioned about psychotronics and they mentioned about different types of mind control technology and signal using a person to bounce the signal off to somebody else that they want to harass. Like all these different categories are like, symbol systems, bioresonance systems. They start throwing out these categories. Even when they called it acupuncture wars that China was developing to attack people's acupuncture points. And so there's things that are really fascinating that they'll throw little tidbits out. So imagine if you extrapolate that into the covert tech world. If that's what I'm trying to get to is that I've had people who've worked in other facilities, and we've had quantum computer systems and holographic computer systems, photonic ones for decades, and they still pretend like we're just making them now, but they've been using these things already covertly. So when you start fast forwarding that, and looking at like anti-gravity we've had back in the 50s, 60s, alternative energies technologies, zero point stuff, then it's not so hard to understand. Okay, so if you have all that as a context, and you understand that these groups have also been in contact, and it's been increasingly coming out in the mainstream this past year or two from the disclosure movement about, alien spaceship crash retrieval programs, psionic teams recently that were talked about in News Nation documentary. You start to then put a framework to say, okay, wow, if these groups are that far ahead of us and they have these arrangements with these negative extraterrestrials, what are they then? It's easier to understand how this is happening because if they're selling us out to them for the negative ETs, money is not, they don't want money. They want they trade in currency of people's consciousness and energy and soul pieces. So that becomes the trade deals that end up showing up and creating such crazy scenarios that we would never even think about, you know. So that's kind of a long way around it, but this kind of a, you know, just to kind of sum up that idea. Um, because this group in Northrop Grumman that was harassing you, they're part of this other secret time intelligence divisions that I've been tracking the past couple of years and seeing and getting attacked by a bunch of them as well, especially when I'm working with certain clients and my own history during my own time period of my own 20 and back program. That's a longer story to go into. I was involved in a couple of these time bureaus as well. And before I was blank slated with my memory being wiped, but then I've had so many encounters and other people I've worked on, more niche clients that are also in the secret space program, my lab community, and some of them we were together in programs. You know, some of them recognize me, and some of them I recognize first, and we trigger each other and have to help heal and open up that whole Pandora's box. So there's a lot of there's a lot of branches to this tree of consciousness that we've all kind of come into bring back to the original point. Like, how do we bring love to this, to the depths of the abyss? We have to understand some of the depths of the abyss, at least as it relates to your form of service that you are specialized in to help heal, right? That part of the, root system, so we can anchor more divine sunlight there, and be able to alchemicalize it, right? And have that portal to the earth be more visible as opposed to the, re-entrenchment attempts. But this Northrop Grumman group, they're called the Trans-Temporal Resolution Office, very secretive group. They're kind of like an overarching quality control inspector team for all these different time bureaus that exist across the defense contractors and military intelligence groups, DIA, NSA, CIA. They all have their own little divisions working with not just time travel, but time manipulation. How do we manipulate public opinion? How do we influence people to uh, be stuck in a limited option narrative perspective? Like basically the real matrix enforcers, if you want to think about it that way. But they work with a lot with technology to try to limit people's perceptual framework on a quantum level, like quantum time technologies, where they try to manipulate people's ability to navigate in time on a quantum level to try to box us in so that we're not aware that all these other phase angle perspectives are there if we just shift our our resonance to that timeline and or that superposition to that new timeline. So they try to box people in literally with this advanced technology to try to steer them towards negative timelines instead of positive ones. So it's a whole level of like covert psyops that's been going on that's like freaking huge. It's like, so that's a whole other so the point is you had a structure in your field that was kind of that group that was trying to limit you. And that module that was called the Remote Quantum Time Harmonic Attunement Module. Remote Quantum Time Harmonic Attunement Module. That was an upper back Kensington Northrop Grumman base. And what was that one at?
I think it's in Nevada.
You're right. That's yeah,
So,
Central Nevada. That's what it was. Yeah.
so
Um,
I kind of want to. We've been going on for quite a while, and I want to get to some other points.
sure,
So
let's do that. I was just
tear
trying to.
away from, that was really cool to go into the specifics, but you were also touching on the general about how the basic infiltration and reinforcing of the false matrix is done on this very subtle level. And you say they're trying to, but they're not just trying to, they are doing it.
Doing it.
The
Yeah, yeah,
majority of our consensus reality is under this kind of mind control
yeah,
spell that keeps us locked into this very 3D separated way of thinking that, obviously humans have wars and disease and all this negative stuff, and it's kind of being programmed. And this is how this infiltration is taking place. Like, if they try to come, I think you mentioned this in other talk, and do it overtly, they'll be stopped. So they have to do it very subtly, and they're doing a really good job. And it is proliferating to keep this negative timeline in place so that humans will kind of choose to go along with it and be co-opted and subverted into this, but there's also maybe the idea of a bifurcation or split, where a certain number, the light workers are effectively holding new timeline frequencies. We're
yes,
doing our work, and humans are waking up, and we're going to kind of do away with this negative false matrix. And
yes,
maybe the false matrix people who aligned with that will stay, and it's kind of a splitting. So why don't you go into more just the general picture
Yeah.
of what's going on and what we can do to help bring about this new earth that we're all
Yeah.
in our heart, that
Well,
all of us
I
cosmic
also
beings, and kind of like wake up to the control and right and see what's
it's a
really
lot. Yeah,
going
it's a
on,
lot.
and to
Yeah.
help people that are really under that control, because you can't just, the people who are under that control, they'll listen to this and they're going to just go, this guy is a crazy new age crackpot, and they won't be able to hear you or resonate with it. So how do we, break through that barrier, right? Not
I
easily,
mean,
but
that's
that's
that's that's
that's
not
like, I think that question will like take us to the end of our hour or so, since you do have so much
sure,
on
sure.
there. So
I
we'll
mean,
try to
it's
keep
a,
it.
the last part is a tough part because for me, like, my reality view of my because of the work I've done and the clients I tracked, it's in a very like specific kind of realm, if our spectrum, my bandwidth. So, I almost sometimes it's very hard for me to relate to like the normal person or like the muggle in that sense, and especially because I'm so out there with the stuff I do, but it's for me, it's so tangible and I see it every day. So for me, it's like, it's a norm, but my norm is so far away from the norm. And for me, I don't necessarily see myself as a bridge to the mainstream, though the people are better at building bridges to the mainstream. For me, I'm more like, okay, you want to learn about calculus as opposed to teaching your basic math, in terms of the level of what we're working with. But of course, there's certain principles that are relevant to understand. And there are natural energy flows that are occurring this year, starting in 2025 in the spring, specifically April, May, and then going forward into the fall. That's going to be very powerful catalytic energy coming from Mother Earth's core that's going to be coming up. And this is one reason why I'm going to be doing a trip. I'm going out to the Philippines soon and spending more longer time out there. I was out there once in the fall in September, tracking certain points that my guides had told me to track for this bigger grid work awakening. Precursor point of that is that there's been a lot of many years ago in 2012, guides had told me that, there was a 13-year time period. 2025 is a real marker point for this ascension energy to start kicking in place, and that it was going to be a huge, change that was possible starting from 2025 forward, especially refining it over the years 2025 to 2030, 31 was a really important period for both solar changes, bigger micronova or like hyperflares coming from the sun, which I see as more like 2030-ish, and positive ET landings. 2029 so far is still what they're trying to hold space for. But again, there's also negative groups that are trying to do the opposite and create the invasion timeline, or fake invasion timeline as well, which is connected to the drones that have been flying around recently, collectively with defense contractor SSP toys. So there's a lot of things at play, between the deep state and other groups that are in power that are competing interests that are trying to maneuver, right, our structures, our options. And so it's always important people to think outside the box, bring it back to the heart, because love is going to be our guiding compass. So even for people that aren't into the extra level of what I'm talking about, this is a common message that all the masters and teachers have talked about. If we're not in the heart chakra center, we don't, then we're already lost the game. So the point is that the dark groups always try to pull us out of our center. They always want us to be overly thinking things, disconnected from the body, disconnected from the earth, polluting the sky. They're really trying to affect us on all different scales. So we have to be that much more diligent to be like, okay, our divine source connection is superior to all this nonsense. And if we can be able to, do simple stuff first to reinforce our local space, to be able to go within, find that quiet voice, find that intuitive center, find that love source, and ask your angels and your galactic teams, if you're aware of them, to help really start to remediate your local environment so it's more compatible with the new earth energies that are setting the stage for this portal to the new earth, which literally, back to the Philippines story, there's 7 locations they were showing me globally. First, they're going to be activated by what look like beautiful Phoenix solar energies coming out of Gaia's core. And it's got part of Gaia's plasma heart awakening, where her core is not just iron and crystalline, but there are physicists who talk about how there's fusion going on in Gaia's core, and that there is this inner kind of plasma like sun type thing going on down there. Not just a spiritual sun symbolically, but there's a active plasma, super condensed stuff going on in Gaia's core. And there's a guy named Professor Meyl, Meyl, German professor who wrote a book on scalar wave physics, and he talks about this and the power of like neutrinos and how it's connected to this fusion process in the core of the Earth. So there's some cool alternative scientists that are trying to expand the paradigm of what we're seeing happening in the core of not just the Earth but other planets outside just the rigid. Oh, it's just a solid ball of metal. And like this like this very de-evolved, not honoring the consciousness of the planet as being a living being, but just a bunch of ecosystems that are, it's the same way, the doctors and scientists try to overly limit us from the post-industrial revolution to be overly mechanized, right, in our thinking and separating matter from spirit as the biggest satanic act ever. So this is what the dark groups want to do. They want to separate us from source, separate us from our true connection, and so anyway, so the point is getting back into that. Uh, so in the Philippines, I'm going to be I'm not doing a retreat, but I'm opening up to some people if they want to meet me out there in early May for the bigger activations, because there's going to be huge waves coming out of the earth at seven locations. One's in the Philippines, one's in northern England, one's in Paraguay, one's in Nebraska, one's in the Bahamas. Don't know the seventh one yet, but there's also a lot of dark stuff going on in these areas where the negative groups are aware of this heart chakra orgasm energy of Gaia that's about to start, really kickstarting the whole evolution energy. So they're already trying to manipulate that. So we're going to be doing group work on Zoom in February, March to try to remediate and counter that people can also join me on if they message me. And so this bigger wave of light coming out of Gaia's core, really they showed me back in 2012 that the end of the Mayan calendar is really an opening of a singularity in time where love energy was flowing back through time, and that 13-year period was like the return wave. It's like a soliton wave of love energy of the creator going through Gaia's history. And that return wave is like her orgasmic up phoenix rising energy that's going to be pouring out starting in May and then in the fall and October. I'll be leading a group out to St. Martin in the Caribbean, where there's going to be other powerful energies coming out through there in mid-October. So there's some powerful things that we can really steer that can really be like surfing in a new wave as the bigger kind of shift if people want to be on that frontier wave, a lot of shake, rattle, and rolls, of course, going on because other people are trying to do the opposite, right? So we need to really be diligent with our light and love and focus and realizing we're all more powerful to be the ground crew than we think we are. We're here to also be agents of action of change in our own way and call out the injustices so that the galactic teams can come in and be like, no, this is a violation. We don't consent to this crap anymore. And we need intervention now. And like really calling in our galactic teams to give them permission to take down some of these technologies and facilities. That's what we do pretty much every 2 weeks is we focus on specific areas and specific groups from Andromedans, Pleiadians, Arcturians, other ones come in and they go in there to shut some stuff down. So it's a much more dynamic thing that a lot of us may have higher authority on higher realms than we realize, maybe more than we do here in the physical realm because of our lineage and our off-world connection. So the more people can reconnect to their soul and their star lineage, then and see ourselves as a ground crew, like we're on the side of Gaia's castle. We're here to open up the doorway so our good troops can come in and kick out the oppressors, and be back in nature. Do the sun meditation. Go to warm places. Be in the ocean. Like there's a lot of new energies coming through the oceans over the next several years. So for me, that's another reason why I need to be in the Philippines and the ocean island doing work out there is to also so I can baptize myself in that energy and then help others more effectively. So that's more of a roundabout
Yeah,
summation because I
no,
know we're running out
I
of time
think
here.
this is great. So I guess, thank you so much. And how would people contact you? I don't think you have a website. So what would
Yeah,
be the best way
used to,
for
not
anyone
anymore.
listening to this to want to, reach out? And I'll put it in the description. But what is your preferred
Well,
way?
first thing I use on Facebook for sure. I use more often. I do have an Instagram theoretically, but I haven't really been using it much. But it's there technically. I have to start getting back into it. Facebook, I'm on more often. I have a YouTube channel. People put my name, search my name on there, and in my playlist tab, there'll be a bunch of other blog talk interviews. But yeah, people email my email address, which is psijumper, PSI
Yeah.
jumper
Okay. So should I could put that in the
at
description
Gmail.
for
Of
this
course,
so
you put the
people
email
have,
there. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And and if people want to reach me on phone, I mean, I'll be away starting in February, so I'll be on WhatsApp. People can text me there, but just I'm not going to be able to get
All
regular
right, I
phone
think I
calls.
think we'll
But
just stick if you're okay with having your email
yeah,
address
put the
so
email there,
that
and people can
I
request
just
my number. I can
anyone
give it
who's
to them.
watching this. So hopefully, yeah, this
Sure.
was great. And of course, uh, if for everyone who does watch this, always remember to, hit the like, the subscribe, the
Yes,
notifications, try to help grow the channel, refer this to other people that might want to see this or check out the other videos on the channel. But yeah, this was, I'm so excited to connect with you because I really I resonate so strongly in the work you're doing is so profound and on point to help, bring about this positive timeline and the portal to the new earth. So it really is in alignment with what I'm doing. And I'm really grateful that
likewise.
we
Thank
were
you.
able to do the session to help clear these, implants, blocks, energies.
Yeah.
We didn't even go into detail though, and you did mention this in one of your other videos that I watched on you, where you had me go into this room and bring all that negative reptilian lifetime and put it on a hard drive, come out of the room, shut, seal the door, give it to the Mintakan group, the positive ET group, for them to
Yes.
like process and clear all of that. So it's really fascinating with the way that you work, and to do this. So I can't, recommend you enough for people that feel called, if you see this, to have
Thank you.
Stephen do some work, on that level.
And
He's
I will
still
be doing remote work from the Philippines too. So
Yeah, so he's still
obviously,
available to do these
obviously.
personal sessions,
Yeah.
and otherwise, just your group work, and
Yes.
grid work and all that stuff.
I
So
also record all the group work too. If people want to get copies of like, we can on Dropbox, I audio links and stuff too. Yeah, yeah. Side note.
okay.
Awesome. Thank you so
Well,
much, Harlan.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. Okay, thanks for everyone who came to watch today and refer to other people, and thank you, Stephen, for being on here. So this is
Wonderful.
awesome. Okay, till the next portal to the new earth. Bye.
Blessings.